In the Gemara in Bava Basra on Daf Nun Ches, the Gemara says a story how Rabbi Mendel would go around to mark different places in Eretz Yisrael where people were buried, so that way Kohanim would know where they are allowed to walk and where they're not allowed to walk, so that way they don't become tamei. And the Gemara says that he wanted to mark the area of Maras Machpelah, which is talked about in this week's Parsha, and he, according to some versions, was in a dream. He got to the area where Avraham Avinu is buried, and when he got there, he saw that Eliezer, the Eved Avraham, was standing outside of the area and didn't let him in. So Rabbi Mendel asked Rabbi Eliezer, what is Avraham Avinu doing? So Eliezer told him that he is currently standing under Sara's arms, and Sara Imenu is looking at his head. And according to some girsas of the Gemara, the story was that Sara Imenu was looking at Avraham Avinu's head in order to check it for lice, to remove any lice that's in his hair. With her two hands, she's removing the lice. Which simply, if you read this story, is obviously a little bit puzzling. But with the help of Chassidus, the Tzemach Tzedek explains a deeper dimension to the story, which we can learn from and get a better understanding, and also maybe take a lesson for ourselves. Chassidus explains what's the idea of lice, what's the symbolism of lice. And we know, many of us know, the concept of a mashpia and a mekabel, that in general, usually there's something that is given from one person to another person. There's the mashpia, the giver, and then there's the intended receiver, the mekabel, the person who's receiving whatever is being given, and he's supposed to be using it for a specific purpose. However, Chassidus explains that sometimes when you have someone who's giving over one thing to someone else, or has something for a designated purpose, sometimes you can have a yenikas chitzayim. You can have someone from the outside and take whatever it is of this thing and use it for its unintended purpose. Use it for unintended purpose. And that's, for example, what lice represent. We have a lice that the hair grows, and the intention of hair growing and a person having their hair grow is not for lice to grow inside of their hair, but sometimes lice can come along and take advantage of the situation and use the situation for their own benefit and take whatever it is that they want, not for the intended purpose. And they can come into the hair and grow there and hang out over there and there, hang out. Or for example, you can have this idea that a person can have their food, and animals can come along and take their food. The food wasn't for the animal, it wasn't for the mouse that came in, and the mouse can come along and take the food. In Chassidus, it brings this idea we find also by human beings. The Mitzrayim represented this idea. The Eibishter gave Mitzrayim a big bracha, gave him the Nile River, and how it provided water from Mitzrayim. And instead of Mitzrayim using it as a proper receiver and using it to recognize Hashem, they denied Hashem. They used the bracha to say, "Li yariv ani asisi," Pari said, "I made I'm in charge. I'm so to speak the God." Which also, on a side note, explains why one of the makkos that Mitzrayim got was Mida Keneged Mida. They got the kinim. So, anyways, this is the symbolism of kinim. It represents the idea of yinikas chatzainim, taking something for not its intended purpose. Now, simply, you can understand that where is the issue? The issue is in this thing that's coming along and taking what it's not supposed to, or taking it and using it for its unintended purpose. However, Chassidus explains that really the problem is not only in this person who's coming and taking this hashpa, taking it for the unintended purpose. The issue is partly in the mashpia, the one who's giving. For example, if the hair is too long or it's not taken care of, so then if this is not addressed, so then the lice can come in. If you leave food around where there's holes in the wall and the mice can come in, you don't close up the holes, so then the mice can come in and they can take the food. So in a certain sense, the issue or the problem is not always in the person who's just coming along and taking the thing for the unintended purpose. It's sometimes in the provider that they're not addressing, they're not filling in the gaps, they're not closing the holes of where these things can come in. So Chassidus explains that Avram in general represents the idea of Chesed. Avram was one who gave. He was mashpia, not only for himself, for the people around him, but also for the goyim, for the nations. And Avram in general was this idea of chesed, and he just gave and gave, so much so that he gave, and as a result of his chesed and his giving and his kindness, he gave even to all around, even to Yishmael, and to the point that even when Yishmael was doing not necessarily the right thing, he was happy to give, and he was happy for Yishmael to be his descendant, which represents the idea of that you could give with chesed, but not have these limitations, not have these safeguards in place to make sure there's no unique aschitzanim, there's no one taken from the outside. And that's the symbol of the idea that there's this could be this lice in Avram Avinu's hair. Sara, who represents the idea of shrara, of being of gevura, of being on top and being and overlooking, which in Chassidus is connected with the idea of ban, which is the idea of shem ban of Eibusher, which is connected with beer, refining. But Bekitzer, the story in the Gemara was that Sara was checking for the lice. Sara was the one who had this perspective that yes, it's important to give, but at the same time that we're giving, we have to make sure we have these safeguards in place. And that's why she ultimately said that when Yishmael wasn't acting correctly, it's time for him to go. He needs to go out of the way. We need to remove Yishmael because we need to make sure that we have these safeguards in place. We have these safeguards in place that even though we're giving in a way that doesn't lead to negative things. And this is why she did it with her two hands, because even when you're putting safeguards in place, it has to be in a way of Yamin Mikreves and small Deichen. We could say maybe this connects with one other idea in the Parsha, that it says that when Avram sent Eliezer to go get a wife for Sara, it says that Avram sent with Eliezer Kol Tuv Adanav. He gave over everything to Eliezer in order to give over to Yitzchak. Which the obvious question is, how could Eliezer take all of Avram Avinu's stuff? So actually, some of Harshim explain that Tuv Adanav means it was just the best of his stuff. There's a few precious things that Avram Avinu was giving over to Yitzchak, and he gave it to Eliezer to take with him to show the potential wife. These are the good things that Avram Avinu is giving Yitzchak. However, Rashi, we know, explains that when it says Kol Tuv Adanav, the Rebbe explains that the difference between Toiv and Tuv. Toiv means the best part. Tuv means everything. That Avram was giving everything over to Yitzchak. And that's why Rashi explains that he gave over a document saying that he's giving over everything to Yitzchak. And the Rebbe points out an interesting point. At this point, Yitzchak is 37 years old. He's very old. He's not a young child anymore. And not only that, he's after the Akedah. So he seems like, and he was happy to go. Yitzchak was happy to go with the Akedah. So it seemed like Yitzchak was in a good place. He was a mature adult, and he was in a healthy spiritual place. But nevertheless, we find that Avram Avinu didn't say, "Oh, you know what? Let Yitzchak take care of himself. I'm not going to invest myself in my child anymore." He's at a stage where he'll just do whatever he wants, and hopefully he'll find a good shidduch and he'll be good, and he'll choose it. He's on a good path, and I'll just leave him alone. The Rebbe says no. We see that Avram Avinu, even though Yitzchak was at a older stage already, Avram Avinu didn't suffice with that, and he did whatever he could. He gave over whatever he could to be invested into his child, and no matter what stage they were, he was totally invested in his child to help them to whatever they need, so that way they have the best possible situation. And the Rebbe explains the same thing also, the lesson we can take for ourselves, that no matter what, obviously it has to be in the appropriate way, but we have to be given over to our children and provide whatever we need for our children and be invested, totally invested in our children, no matter what stage they are, in order that they continue to grow and they have the most tzlacha begashmis, but also beruchnis. But the lesson we obviously learn from the first point is that on one hand we have to be totally invested in our kids and provide for them whatever they need. At the same time, we have to make sure that there's the safeguards in place that whatever we're providing for them leads them to the right results and the best for our children and the best to bring revelation Eibusher more into this world. A good Shabbos.